part of the video already, just to be full transparency, and it was very thought provoking. So I stopped watching it because I was like, this would be really cool to talk about on stream. Tons of stuff. There's so much stuff. So here we go. His video is simply called "Stop
Man
Tipping."
refusing to tip says servers should get 25% for doing their job.
20. Okay, first off, so we're talking about tipping, and like, so I think like, what do we consider? What do we consider a standard good tip? In the industry, 20% is what a lot of people will say is your like standard good tip. 25% seems like that's kind of high. 20% again is what most industry professionals would consider like that's a good tip. They've done a good job. So just reading, I don't know if this is a tweet or where they pulled this from, but man refusing to tip says servers shouldn't get 25% for doing their job. It used to be you give a tip if someone gave exceptional service. He continues, when was the last time you got exceptional service anywhere? It's just expected. You don't get 25% because you did your job. So just like right off the bat, like we're like a second into the video, I have so much to say about this. First off, I've definitely had exceptional service going out to eat. I don't go out to eat very often. I'm also like a really low maintenance like guest. I don't, because okay, here's the thing. Terrible social anxiety. But I've been like really trying to force myself to go out more. I don't want to chat. I don't want to talk. I just want to order my food, get it, eat, and go home. Because it's like a lot of the times I'm going out, like I'll go stop somewhere after work, which is already really late. I finished like a 12, 14 hour day. I'm beat. I've been in a restaurant all day, right? And my thing is like, I don't want to, after cooking for 12 hours, I don't want to go home and cook and clean up more stuff. So sometimes I'll stop somewhere. And sometimes I just want to, like, most of the time I'll just stop and go through a drive-through, because if I'm going to get out of my car and back up onto my feet again, it is only going to be to walk into my house. Every now and then I'm like, it would be nice to be able to like sit and enjoy food like at a table and not like hunched over my desk eating like a little gremlin as fast as I can so I can go to bed. So every now and then I'll stop, and it's like I don't ever like to, even with like when I eat with friends, and I think this is also an issue that I've gotten from working in the industry so long, and there's not a lot of time for breaks in restaurants. and as like a manager, I've like sort of been almost conditioned to like never stop. Like there's always something to do. If person A, B, and C don't need help, person D, E, and F need help. And sometimes they all need help. And so there's never like a moment where you get to sit down, and if you do find that rare chance, you don't have a lot of time to eat. So I've gotten in this habit that I like eat so fast, and I also just like don't like I just want to be back home, because I work so much and I'm like on my feet all day that I just want to be home. So I'm always like kind of in a hurry to go home, regardless if I'm eating by myself, with friends. It's like, let's eat and then move on to whatever we're doing next, or I'm like, or I need to go home and I'm just gonna relax at home. But long story short, the service that I feel like I've received, even going to just some like little like late night diners, has been really nice. Everybody has been so friendly, and you know what it is? I have noticed is if like if you're nice, if you're just nice to the servers, big surprise, they're nice back, and you get a lot better service. I also tip like fairly well, just being in the industry so long. Unless like, you know what, like from one industry professional to another, here's this, and I'll go to once I get comfortable. Like I have a few places that I'll go to frequently, because I can go in, eat, and go home. And so like some people do, like it's gotten to the point where like I would walk in and they would like start my food, and they'd be so friendly. You know, I've like had people like hook me up with stuff, and it's like and I'm not saying like that should be expected, but I definitely have received really, really good services within the last year. And I don't know if this is a product of so many restaurants shutting down recently. Just like, not even recently, like since COVID, there's been a plethora of restaurants shutting down. And the amount of restaurant jobs almost feels like it's shrinking by the day. Not a lot of full service restaurants can actually feasibly exist anymore. So I feel like some of those spots are shortening. That's why I feel like you see a lot more counter service restaurants now than you do full service restaurants. Anyway, I tipping should not be mandatory. I now hold on, because in the past I have been like, I fully agree with autograt for really large parties. One, that's because large parties take up a huge amount of space, and they generally hang out much longer than a normal couple of tables would. So it can end up hurting the restaurant as well as the staff if, you know, only 9 people come in and lock down that big of a space for the full amount of time that the restaurant is open. I've seen it happen. We've had it happen a lot recently, where we're getting these huge parties booked, and they're there. They'll come in at like 6. We close at 9, and they'll hang out at 10:30 all the way up to like 11 p.m. We've been closed for 2 hours, and I've just got people hanging out waiting to like finish closing up after them, myself included, where it's like, I'll send all the cooks home, I'll send the dishwasher home, and I'm just big chilling, and it's like, oh, they need dessert. It's like, oh, okay. But it's like, we're after close, and so it's just like eating up time. So autograt, I kind of agree with up to a point, as long as it's like easily communicated to the guest that it does exist. Zero, how the heck are you doing, Zero? Hopefully you're doing well. Anyway, we still have a whole whopping, like, the entire video left. I went off on a huge rant. We're barely into this. Food news. So let's get into this video a little bit more.
25% for doing their job. What happened where like this is now a news story? Like why is this become a news story? Is there a?
It is weird that this is a news story, and then it's like popping off. But I think it's an important topic to talk about. What are we talking about? So, I haven't watched the full video yet, but on my way home, I saw that Amsongolds, who's somebody that I watch like a decent amount of like YouTube content of, talk about tipping in the U.S. in general, and it kind of got me thinking a little bit about it. So I thought, why not just finish, like, we'll watch the full thing on stream, and we'll talk about it. I'm good. I'm doing pretty well. It was kind of a long day at work. You know, just another long one. But I'm excited to be home and streaming and hanging out with you guys.
Video for this? Let me see if I can find it. There it is. Okay, so where's the dude's video? Is this like a video or what? Is this a video? Like, can I watch him talk about this? Or it's an AI article? Like, wait.
We're going to go for it a little bit.
And I mean, it seems like really look like this guy specific. We found it. Okay, all right, so this is a real person. We thought this wasn't a real person. It turns out it is. Let's go ahead and look at this.
The Chris? Holy moly. Chris, how the heck are you? Happy belated birthday, by the way.
So I'm not tipping anymore. I'm done. I'm out. Used to be you would give a tip if somebody gave exceptional service. When was the last time you got exceptional service anywhere?
Again, I feel like the type of service that I have received is no different than what it is either no different or is better than what it used to be. And again, I almost feel like it's because it's like the amount of jobs that are there are shrinking. I could be crazy, but I feel like every day that I look up food news, it's about restaurants closing.
Did they bring you the bill at the end and they're like, here, just fill this out, 20%, 25%? No, you.
Again, okay, look, I will agree, 25% is kind of a lot, and I've actually don't think that I have ever seen a suggested 25% tip on anything, at least where I live and the places that I've gone. Usually it's like 10, 15, 20. I've even seen places like go like 7, 10, 15, and not even up to 20. Again, I feel like 20 is like sort of the accepted is not the right word, is what most people in the industry would say is a solid tip, and shows kind of that they have done a good job. 25% is kind of a lot. And I can admit that as well. And again, it's like, if we have any newcomers or just like, I've been in the industry a long time, like at least 12 years now, I think. 99, not 99. A good amount of it has been is all kitchen work. I've done some counter service stuff where I work the counter. I've done bussing. I actually did bussing as an internship. I was supposed to do like shadow servers and learn how like all the front of house stuff worked out as, and they just used me as a free extra set of hands to bus tables. I think most restaurants in my area with a big group stores 25% gratuity. I find that to be like that's kind of nuts. So here, like we have Autograt, and I feel like it's 15%, maybe 18, but I don't think it goes above 20, and I don't think I've ever seen it above 20. You generally receive great service. Even when I receive only just an okay or even a bad service, I just assume they've had a bad day. I tip 20%, but always round up to the nearest dollar to make adding up the total for my... Yeah. I feel that. Chicago. Now, okay. Chicago has a pretty big food scene. Am I correct? That's where... starts with an A. Oh no, the guy that made the sugar helium balloons. I want to say it's like it starts with an A, but I'm like the whole it was huge when Chef's Table on Netflix came out. I believe it was on Chef's Table. But you know who I'm talking about. Yeah. The helium balloons are like really well. Like I thought it was so cool what they were doing with food over there. Very cool. I work in sort of like a foodie town, and I haven't seen those things, but I also don't, I can't afford to go to anywhere like that, like at that level. I just don't go to those places. Plus it's like, I got a 10-year-old, so it's like, we go to places that are like, unless I'm going out by myself, which is a very rare case, like, to like somewhere nice, which doesn't happen very often. Usually it's like some place that I go to after work that's open late, diners, bars, whatever. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to like any upscale, like crazy upscale places. Then the largest party I ever was anymore is a party of 6. There's a fair share of Michelin stuff. Yeah. It's crazy to me that there's no Michelin. I don't think we do Michelin in my state. Date yourself. I don't. Okay, here's the thing though: is I can't afford to date myself more. Tons of different cultures here. That's rad. I wanna come out. I wanna come out and eat some good food out there.
You did your job. I made food. You carried it to my table. You got me a Diet Coke. Thank you. That was your job. You don't get 25% because you did your job. And I'm not the bad guy here. I'm not. If you own a restaurant, just tell me what it costs. I don't want people to go hungry.
Nobody really wants to know what it costs. Here's the thing. It is getting crazy expensive. And so I've done a lot of managing for different places. I've seen a lot of the numbers. I watch my food costs. I try to make sure that I'm hitting labor targets. Anyway, but so back to what this guy is saying. He's just like, I shouldn't have to tip. These people should be making a living wage. And I agree. So from my understanding, in different states, this is handled in different ways. In the state that I live in, the servers are paid minimum wage. Not necessarily a living wage. And I think if so the big problem is I feel like most restaurants, if not all, are constantly dancing on a fine line of either going out of business or making a small amount of profit. And you are constantly dancing on this line, trying to make it work. And again, we talked about this like kind of before we dug into the video. A lot of places are dropping positions or going to counter service, because if you're doing counter service, you have less service staff, less wait staff. So this does a couple of things. Less if your labor budget is lower, you have more. You're able to pay the smaller amount of workforce a higher wage. It shrinks the tip pool. So instead of sharing $100, if let's say you make $100 in tips that day, and every restaurant has a different tip structure, but let's just pretend that the tips are split evenly. If you get $100 in tips and there's 10 people on the staff that are getting tipped, you divide that $100 up between those 10 people. So everybody takes home $10. But let's say there's half of that amount of staff, and then everybody now is taking home $20. So that's something to consider. And you're going to see, I personally have already seen this, where you'll go into a place, and I've seen it in our own reviews of the restaurant that I work at, where people are like, oh, they seem understaffed. It was like, sometimes it was hard to be able to get my server's attention because they were taking so many tables. And that's, again, to help lower the labor costs to make it feasible for the restaurant to stay in business. So the offside to this is, if you wanted to get rid of tipping and you're not seeing an increase in business, but you need to pay your workers more to take into account that they are no longer getting tipped, it's to jack up the prices of the food. And we've already seen food going up. He's already kind of, I feel like he's already... No, he didn't. For some reason, I thought he was talking about the food prices. I don't think he... Oh, he kind of did right here, where he's saying, like, tell me what it really costs, right? So I'm sure everybody, and I know we've talked about this on stream too, where, like, the food prices are going up. We just mentioned it right here, where, like, stuff's getting expensive. Now imagine that, and then, like, adding, like, us raising... So here's the thing is... So we could potentially, in my mind, this isn't how it works, but you could bump up the prices 30% or so, and have that just go straight into pay. The way that the restaurant I work at right now, how they handle it is all the cooks. So the back of house. So I like back in the day, back of house was not tipped out. This structure has changed quite a bit. It was just assumed that cooks were getting paid more. But really, like, the servers make so much more money than the cooks will ever make. But the way that the restaurant I work at now, they all make minimum wage, but we guarantee that they will get paid X amount. So if the tips that you get don't get you to that amount or more, or it can go over, we will cover up to that minimum amount. They make more because of tips. Yeah. So, to increase the wages to where, like, the at least the very least the wait staff would make enough to live off of. I don't know off the top of my head what that would look like, but I feel like now if they're counting on 20%, I don't know if a 20% increase on all of the menu items would fix it, because I guess it would be because then everything would be a little bit more expensive, and I don't know if that would cover it. I'm trying to, like, do the mental math and gymnastics in my head, and it's not computing. But yeah, it's kind of wild. And I know there are some states where you make like $2. It's like you make less than a minimum wage. I don't really understand how it works, because that's not how they handle it in the state that I live in here. So I've never quite understood it.
What does it cost for me to get my food?
Would it be needed?
So
Yeah, 25 an hour. Exactly.
Join the cartel, do some Lord of the Flies, Oliver Twist. Like, I want people to be taken care of. Just tell me what it costs.
Just go ask Europe. They figured it out a long time ago. Yeah.
So I feel like he makes a really interesting point. It's like, how is this handled in other countries where tipping is not a common thing, or like doesn't happen? because I don't know. So this is something that is like, this topic is something that has plagued my mind for a long time, because as somebody that wants to open up a restaurant in the future, and I want to be able to pay my staff like a living wage and make sure that people can like live, just live. It's something that I think about a lot. What are they doing in those countries that we're not doing? And so it makes me wonder, is like, is the cost of living less? Is the cost of goods less? Are wages just higher in general? Are food prices higher to offset that? I'm really curious, because I don't know, and I don't really know how to go about, like, it's something that I'll have to like really research. Because I've had this talk also with like servers and stuff, because there are places in my town that have started doing no tips. Like, they're like, oh, you don't tip because we're paying them a wage. And talking to servers, they're like, no, those people are actually making less money than they would with tips, because it's like, with tips you would generally take X amount, and instead restaurants are adding on things called a service charge. And service charge by law does not have to go to employees. It can go right back into the restaurant, which is sort of misleading. I know we've talked about this for sure recently, within the last month or two. So it's like, I feel like if restaurants are one going to go no tip, or at the very least start putting all these charges on, they need to be a little more transparent about what they are and where they're going. Because if I saw that I was getting a service charge automatically taken out of my bill, I would be like, great, this is going to the workers. They've been tipped. We're good here. I've done, good day. I'm going to go home. And it's really garbage that it's not going to where you think it's going. I think there's regulations to how much companies' cost of goods suppliers can charge for their goods. I see what you. Oh, okay. I see what you mean. And I mean, we've seen the government, or at least a governing body in the U.S., whether it was state or federal, I can't remember. We talked about this a couple days ago, or like they stepped in to tell like food delivery companies they couldn't gouge restaurants with like their insane like profit margins. Let's see. In Germany, it's just not a thing, so it mostly becomes confusion. Like, you overpaid. So okay, but so it's like, so in Germany though, it's like, are the servers paid more to make up for the fact that tipping doesn't exist, or is it just like, this is just what servers make, and it just is what it is? I guess is my question, because I've worked with people where it's like, serving is like their career. It's what they do. They just work in restaurants, and they like to serve because they make good money. And that's it. And if people stop tipping, they would no longer make good money. And then there would be those like servers that in my opinion, are really good, would just leave and go do something else. And we would be stuck with a lot, I feel like, not as good servers, or wait staff, or front of house, whatever you want to call it. When I get overwhelmed in Japan, I will hand them a fistful of money, knowing full well they will give me exact change. Dude, that's amazing.
What do you mean? So
we're not even 2 minutes into this video. Oh no.
Let's go ahead here and we'll look and see what the comments are on this topic, right? And so you read this, yes, tipping's out of control. iPads at pickup counters have got to go.
Okay, so the iPad thing, right? So counter service is like, that's like the way of the future for restaurants. It's like the step before they start putting in the robots, which we've already seen the robot baristas. We've seen the robot chip things for Chipotle. And again, it's just all trying to reduce the amount of labor that is that restaurants accrue. And sometimes it is hard to like, I don't know. I definitely tip less for like at counter service places. I see. Than I do like at full service ones. But it's still like, I still generally tip 20%. Right now, like a lot of places, if you don't have bussers, food runners, hosts, the servers are now like kind of expected to pick that all up as part of their job duties, where in a lot of like full service restaurants, you would have a host, you would have people bussing your tables, you'd have people running your food. And now they're kind of doing it all. And again, with a smaller staff, the tip pool is smaller. So they're making more in a sense, but I know that some people feel like the thing is, right? So talking to servers, they want all of those positions to be there for them as support staff. But then at the end of the day, they're like, oh, but now I'm making less money. This sucks. Why do I have to tip them out? And it's like, what? And this might be something people don't know is, so servers, they get their tips, and then the servers tip out the support staff or the bartenders. Some of it goes to the kitchen for the cooks. So they're not taking that full 20% that they're of sales that they're accruing, or whatever percentage of their tip out of their sales is. It does get spread out. So there is that to like kind of think about, I guess. Anyway.
My God. Tipping DoorDashers before I've even received my food.
Oh, yeah. So it looks like a lot of people are really fed up with this kind of stuff, man.
I don't mind, I guess, tipping when I order stuff through like DoorDash or whatever ahead of time. But you know, now that I think about it, it's like when you take an Uber, you tip afterwards. So there's no reason why you couldn't tip after you receive your food. That is kind of weird that that's the model. Huh. Anyway. That's not something I thought about.
And I'm not surprised. I feel like nobody really likes having to tip, especially whenever... I mean, let's be real, guys.
Nobody's forced to tip. At the end of the day, you're not forced to tip. There are definitely videos I've seen where like servers have like chased people out the door to be like, hey, you didn't tip. And here's the thing for me. Look, at the end of the day, the servers are always going to bitch and moan about not getting tips. It happens all the time. I hear about it all the time. You know, and it does suck because they are relying on those tips to make their living wage. But it's like, I don't know. It's a double-edged sword, right? Because it would be nice just to be able to pay people that amount of money. And again, I don't know how other countries do it where they're paying. I don't know if like in Europe they're paying the employees more, or if it's or they don't, or the cost of living is just lower. I have no idea. But nobody's like being forced to do it. It's just a generally accepted rule that you do it.
Everything has doubled in price in the last 5 years.
Yes.
Maybe not everything, but a lot of things have. A lot of things.
Until there's a fundamental change in the system. Okay, and so exactly, and I've had this debate a lot, not even a debate, I've just had this conversation a lot with friends. It's like, I have friends that we've talked about opening restaurants. It's like, it's what a lot of us want to do. It's like the end game for us. It's a big conversation of like, and tipping is not the... There are so many problems wrong with restaurants and how they and how they operate here. And I can't speak for anywhere outside of the U.S. I just have a general understanding of how they work here. And it would have to take a huge overhaul on the industry, I think, for something like this to change. And again, I think it would end up affecting... It would end up affecting the guests, the consumers, because I feel like the only way to offset paying the servers... Okay. Here's the thing. We could probably pay the servers, let's say, a decent wage, more than minimum wage for sure. A decent wage. It would probably still be less than what they would be making in tips. So there would be the pushback until this became the norm and like an understood norm. But there would be a pushback from the serving industry, the wait staff, because they would be taking a pay cut if we stop tipping. And that's just how it is. I don't think that it would be feasible to raise food prices to be able to pay them what most of them are making now in well-established, busy restaurants. Because a lot of them take home a pretty decent chunk of change, from my understanding. So not only would we have to change the model that restaurants win, we would have to change the attitude and the outlook of the workers in the industry themselves. And also consumers would probably have to expect to pay a little bit more money or no, they would still end up having to pay more money, but there would probably also be less wait staff to help guests on that side of the restaurant. And I think most people can be understanding to this, but there are definitely a large population of people that don't treat restaurant workers very nice and are not patient or kind. So I feel like, that is also a part of the industry on the consumer side that needs to change. I watch a few YouTubers that do like $1 challenge where they have to make 3 meals, and like it's insight to me that they can do that because here $1 ain't getting you shit. Yeah, and it's like a lot of the times too I'm like kind of watching those and I have a general idea of how much some stuff costs, and I'm like, there's no way that you made that meal in under $10. Like there's just no way. There's absolutely no way. And I know they do the math in front of you, and even then I'm like, you're lying. These are fake numbers. So I think just like as an industry as a whole, from the consumer side and from the worker side, there would have to be a pretty big overhaul on expectations on both sides.
Things have gone up in price ridiculously, and it's been in like this tiny little fucking window, and it's happened. And so this goes and happens. This is awful. Like, this is crazy. So people are getting pinched like crazy. They don't even know how to fucking make ends meet. They can't afford to do anything. They want to go and eat out to at least have...
I remember reading an article a long time ago about something similar to this, or people will be like, well, why are they going out to eat? Why don't they just save? And it's because it's like, they could save, but it's like such a small price to have what is considered a luxury, I guess, every now and then. And so it's like going out to eat is like their luxury. I'm not explaining this good at all because this article was like 10 years ago.
Something nice.
Watching that grocery store haul for $5 for 5 days is crazy. Yeah.
On top of that, because the owner of the restaurant doesn't want to pay the worker, get the fuck out of here. Absolutely not. And so you see everybody here.
So again, and it's not always because they don't want to pay the workers. I mean, one, it is an established way that restaurants run here in the U.S. where you can pay them minimum wage because it is expected that they will earn tips. The restaurant could pay them more, one, if they charge more for the food. So your average amount of money you'd be spending for your meal would still go up, and honestly probably still be about the same or more, in my opinion. Depending on what that food price raise would be to help cover that cost for a higher labor. But I mean, there are definitely people who are like, I don't want to pay these people anything. They're essentially just little monkeys that work for me. And fuck them.
Because, like, for me,
I've worked for those people.
Like,
they're awful.
Whenever I go out, I always tip. And I always tip a lot of money. Even if I get, like, takeout, I will tip them money, usually. Because it's like, I have a lot of money, and I don't really care.
Costs the same to me to get this stuff to make it as to get someone else to make it for me, and I don't have to wash the dishes.
Before, whenever I didn't have any money, I never tipped.
That's the thing is, like... I could just cook for myself. I don't want to. It's like for me, it is such a luxury to be able to go out and eat. And it's nice to be able to afford that luxury every now and then. And sometimes it is hard to like go out to a place to eat and be like, oh, I have to pay this extra amount of money. But I've never been into a point where it's like, I was never able to not do that, I guess. So just like I like very, you know, I don't know. I've been like very blessed, for sure, to be able to just like not have to worry about that too much. I mean, there's definitely times where it's like it's been a struggle, but it's like during those times I just don't go out to eat. But it's always kind of like a shorter term struggle. I don't know if I'm making any sense here.
Never.
It's like I just work a lot, and it's like if I need more money, I just work more. I've definitely been at points where I've had like $10 my name and still had to make rent come from somewhere. Yeah, and again, it's like if I know that I'm in that position, I just don't go out to eat. And I know that like I can't expect everyone to have that same outlook, nor do I expect them to, or it's not fair of me to be like, oh, if you can't tip, you shouldn't go out to eat. And I used to have that mindset when I was younger, because in my mind I was like, we deserve tips. But it's like the more I've gone through it, the more like, you know, it was like start of my career. Me, definitely had sleep for dinner, not the sleep for I have two. Dude, like I remember. So when that last job that I was talking about that I had to leave because of the pay and that they didn't have more hours for me. I was like, I was pinching pennies as much as I could. Like I was, one other thing that's like really been a big blessing working in restaurants is like if I'm hungry, I can eat at the restaurant for free. At least at all the ones that I've worked at in the last 8 years.
Never tipped. And if I ever had to tip, I stole silverware to make up for the money that I got tipped for.
Not the stolen
silverware.
silverware.
And so I never did this.
You guys remember that video of that gal that showed like all of her stolen stuff
but
from
now
restaurants?
That I have the money, it's not a big deal. Like I don't really give a fuck, right? However, we're already close to 25% inflation, but people can't afford 25% tip on top of 25% inflation. Yes, in England, nobody expects you to tip. It's odd how the USA, it's like an additional fee. People are becoming ungrateful and acting as though a tip is their right. There are a lot of waiters and people that work in the service industry that do feel that way. I
feel like the wait staff that do feel like they are entitled to a tip are usually not the servers that are good at their job.
It all the time. And it's a big problem. I think so. I'm 100% in support of the tip, but it should be optional and voluntary. American tipping culture is so stupid, but they only earn $2. Yeah, maybe look at this instead. Yeah. Isn't that the real problem? Not me. The wage service industry tip for $2.15. That's why there is a tip. That's why.
So again, it's like it would be nice if we get to a place where we weren't paying servers such garbage money where they have to have those tips to live. And again, that will affect, at the end of the day, there's only one way that restaurants get more money, and that's more people coming through the door or people spending more money at the restaurant. And if you're not getting more people through the door, you've got to raise prices. That's the only way to do it. So again, you're going to end up paying more regardless if you're tipping or not. It's like if we're going no tips, you're paying more for the price of the food. If we are going with tips, you know, then there's a pretty generalized percentage of how restaurants calculate the cost of their food. And that will kind of go up and down depending on the restaurant, the company, or like corporation of restaurants. But that's generally how it works. Is like we run at 25%. Like 25 to 30 is usually like the like industry standard, essentially. I definitely have the rule for myself that if I can't afford to pay for myself and tip, I shouldn't go there. If it's my suggestion to go there, I should be able to cover the entire bill plus tip. And that's how I look at it as well for myself. Is like, so yeah, like I understand that for sure. What was I talking about? Yeah, the sliding scale for it's like if we have tips or if there are no tips, you're going to pay more. And some restaurants are probably running where they're charging more for the food than they quote unquote should. It's more expensive than really what you're paying for, quality wise. So it's like you just got to assume that the restaurant isn't gouging you. And that food cost percent that is applied to figure out the menu cost price, that percentage that we use is calculated to help cover the cost of like lights, to rent for the space, gas, electric, water, garbage, sewer, chemicals for the dish machine, cleaning supplies, towels, all that stuff is kind of what that percentage calculates and accounts for, as far as like covering all the costs that a restaurant accrues. One of the kind of most interesting pieces of advice I ever got from one of the owners of the owner of the Thai place. He's like, starting out in a restaurant, you'd think that the food would be where your biggest money sink was, but really what they don't tell you is it's the chemicals to run your dish machine, your dishwasher, and towels. People, if you know, anybody who doesn't work in a restaurant, we use towels. We call them towels. They're basically hand towels. That's what like most of the cleaning is done with: sponges, steel wool, towels. They're great. You use them as like pot holders, all kinds of stuff. Sanitation towels. And that shit's expensive.
Well, then maybe fix that. I agree. Tipping needs to end, and companies must pay their people. Yeah, I feel like everybody is. I'm actually surprised, right? And if you don't want to tip, then don't use the service. It typically expects you to use a tip. Well, I don't really think that's the case. I disagree with this, because if you don't want to not get tips, don't get a job that you have to rely on them, and they might not happen. I feel like you can turn this around on the person who is doing the work very quickly, because it's like, okay, so you're working at this job where you can, people can give you money or not, but you're choosing to work there. No. If you buy something on a menu, it should be that price. In Europe, my understanding is it is literally illegal.
So, again, it's not mandatory that you tip unless there's an auto gratuity, and then that's a little bit different. And restaurants that don't put that up front, that you are getting charged an auto gratuity, are shady as fuck, in my opinion. I remember reading an article and talking about the current chef owner about it, and he goes, if a restaurant does not make it vividly clear that there is an auto gratuity or any kind of other charge, they are management is failing everybody in that restaurant. And so that's something that I think I will always remember. So yeah, that stuff has got to be like blatantly clear, in my opinion. But so again, it's like, yes, people are choosing to work there, but people are choosing to work there because they know that they can make a pretty good amount of money. Would they still work there if tipping went away? No, probably not, unless the restaurant was able to pay them a decent compensation for the work that they were doing. But also, so here's the other thing too, is a lot of the times the front of house staff, the servers, the wait staff, work about half the amount the cooks do. Maybe 6 hours a day. I remember some servers were complaining to me about their double that they were working that day, which was their double was an 8-hour shift. And I was working like 16 to 18 hour days at the time. And I was like, don't ever come here and complain to me about your like little 8-hour double shift you have to work. Like, get out of here. I was and it's like, I worked with a ton of guys at the time too, who were from Mexico, and they were working like one guy was working 4 jobs where he would sleep for like 2 hours a day. Until his day off, where he would sleep the whole day, because they would work in a crazy amount, and they would take all of that and they would send it back to their families in Mexico. And that guy came in and it was just like, oh, I gotta work 8 hours today. They were so mad. So it's like, it's a job that they know that they can come in and work and still take home a pretty good chunk of change, and work like six, maybe 8 hours. 8 hours is kind of a long day for them. So, trying to think of like how long they work at the place I work. 6 to 7 hours. Yeah. That's like their typical shift, which is crazy to me. And I'm there, so. Anyway, so yeah, I think if tipping didn't exist, and people are still making $2 an hour, people would leave. And then at the end of the day, though, is like you have people that say this, where it's like, oh, then just don't work there, and it's like restaurants were deemed an essential service because they were kept open during COVID. And I think because of that, a lot of people in the industry were like, if we are essential workers, we want essential pay. And tons of people left the industry. This has already happened. I had a ton of friends leave the industry because they were like, look, we're not going to get health insurance. We're not going to get decent pay. We're not going to get like benefits. We're out. And restaurants took a huge hit. Even now, it's really hard to find really solid help in the industry. I've got, it's difficult out there. But the amount of jobs that are there, I think, are shrinking because so many people are switching to different models, like counter service, where you need less staff. And it's becoming pretty competitive.
Illegal to have a price for something on that's stated, and then you go to the counter and it's a different price instead. And that's including sales tax. They have all of that.
I don't have sales tax here, so
it's crazy
I don't know
how
about this
not
at all.
only do we have to pay sales tax that's not included in the original
I'm out of
price,
coffee and I'm really upset about it.
But on top of that, you also have a tip that's also included that is not.
I could imagine paying sales tax
So
and getting hit with it, like doing the tip. Like that's a lot.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Europe has it right. Personally, I think that's a better solution. The sales tax thing is like it's not really a big deal, but it is. I mean, 8% is a lot, right? Like
it is an extra cost for sure.
Fuck, you spend
Damn, I get rude customers, sexism, inconsistent scheduling, no tips, and I still have to work 8 hours, 48 hours a week. Yeah. These so a lot of the servers, they're okay. Actually, now so they've cut a ton of servers down because people wanted more shifts because they wanted to make more money. But there was a while where like there weren't really any full-time servers. There's only one full-time server. Now there's 2, 3, 2. It depends on what you count as full-time. You pay sales tax and gratuity. Oof.
$1,000. That's $80. That's a lot of fucking money. $80 is a lot of money. So yeah.
But yeah, it is getting so expensive
Should be
to
more like
eat.
Japan, where it's offensive to tip. Tipping is a psyop that pits customer against wage worker to the benefit of the business owner. Holy fuck, that is true. Jesus Christ.
So again, like I'm sure that some business owners look at it that way, where it's like, oh, it's not our fault that my employees are not making 11% tax plus tip plus service fees plus surcharge plus credit card fee. Oh, oof. My emote broke. No, not the emote. That's rough. So I'm sure there are plenty of owners that will spin things that way, where it's like, it's not my fault that you're not making money. You're just not making enough tips, which is scummy. But there are plenty of owners out there that I feel like don't look at it like this, or from this perspective. And, I get it's like just like this because I live out here broke. No, it's such a standard for restaurants that again it's gonna take a lot to change, I think, and it's something that the servers themselves will have to be okay with changing, because they will in the end of the day. If they switch to getting paid more, a quote-unquote living wage, which, I mean, are we ever really going to get paid a living wage? No. But what would be considered a living wage by business owners is going to be less than what they're making from their tips, I think.
Nice, that is true. Wow. Absolutely. Just walk into the kitchen, grab your own food, but a lot of people do tip, and it's not in your face and completely up to you. Yeah. I don't think tipping should be made like illegal or something like that. I don't think so at all.
It would be silly to make it illegal.
Like,
I think.
If you have it,
I feel like we could shift the culture to where it's not like so frowned upon to tip less than 20%, maybe, or change the culture to where restaurants are paying a little bit higher wages. Again, I don't quite understand how it works when you're getting paid like $2 and below minimum wage in some states. Like it doesn't compute in my brain, but it, like here where I am, they're paid minimum wage, and then they just have their tip added on.
They have to do it. I do think that sucks, and it doesn't help anybody.
I actually think that our servers that we have here are pretty good. I've definitely worked in places in the past where I'm like, all of them are bad. All of these people are bad, but like the servers that we have right now, I feel like are actually really good at their jobs. We have a couple like real killers out there on the floor. Actually, all of them. I think all of them are really solid. There's one that's like kind of iffy because he gets really frazzled really fast sometimes. But at the end of the day, it's like he gives good service. He's a good dude. He's hilarious. And he's a salesman. He also does real estate. So like if you're like, hey, I need you to sell this dish, he'll sell the heck out of it. I don't know how he does it. He has the most add-ons on all his tickets. He sells his little heart out. And it's like people love him. I've walked by tables that are talking to him to help drop off food at tables, and they're like eating out of that guy's hand. They're like, they love that guy. And it's like we have amazing servers. And in my opinion, they deserve all the tips that they get. They deserve all of it and more. They are fantastic. I wish they could just get paid a good wage, and not have to rely on tips, but it is how it is. Guy's a bard stacked in charts. I don't know. They're all really great. They're all like super friendly. They all know what they're talking about, and I don't know. They're all just like really nice. They're just nice. And I don't think that I have felt this way about being like, oh, I really enjoy working with all of the servers anywhere else I've ever worked. Usually there's a lot of really like the ones that like they make a lot of mistakes. There was one guy that we worked with. We called him like Mr. On the Fly. And on the fly is like a kitchen term where it's like we need to rush something out as fast as possible. But anytime that we saw his section get sat with like pretty ladies, all of a sudden all the stuff that you're writing for that table was like, oh, this needs to be on, like this needs to be rushed out as fast as possible. And we're like, that guy didn't deserve any tips. He was just gross.
It helps the workers either. It's the same in Australia.
And we get to the point where gratuity was like a truly optional thing and not a social obligation. Yeah.
There's no way any of them could survive. Well, like, how is it that other countries that don't have tipping have restaurants? Because like that's what's so crazy to me, because like if you can't do because how does that happen?
That's a good point. Like, so I like kind of what I've been saying is like how do other countries' restaurants work if tipping is like not a thing? How does it work? Like, what are they doing different, and how do we implement those systems here?
Because there's a lot of other places that have restaurants and they don't have tips. So how is it that the U.S. needs to have tips and there's no other way to do it? But if you look anywhere else, there are all of these other ways to do it, and somehow we can't see that. I don't know what to say. And also, here's another big point. If you can't afford to pay your workers minimum wage, you can't afford to exist.
Dang. It's true though. So there's something that like restaurants will do that's really scummy, and it's there's a chef that I actually really looked up to, and I thought I've always wanted to go to his restaurant. Like I thought his like restaurant concept was so cool. Like all the food he was doing was really awesome. And the thing about working in this industry so long, in like a food town, is at some point we all start to kind of know each other, all the industry veterans, and we talk, and you'll find out very quick who's pulling some shady shit. And I found out this guy, they're not making enough money to pay their workers, and so they're just asking people to work for free until that they can pay them again, which is insane. That guy's restaurant, like just like awful. He came into the restaurant to eat, and I was like, I don't want to cook for this guy. Like it's so scummy. Can't find the video, but there was an amazing conversation I was watching on TikTok about business in America. In other places, they do business to build a relationship. In America, you do business to get as much money as possible. Yeah. I definitely felt that way after I heard that for the first time back in 2020. If you are a business, no matter what business, if you can't afford to pay people a fair wage, you can't afford that business. It's true. But just like, so, okay, here's something else. So the restaurant industry, it's shady. There's so much stuff that happens. People are exploited all the time. So back in the olden days, you would do something called a stage. Essentially, a working internship to get your foot in the door somewhere, and also to learn from like big chefs. And you would, a lot of the times, and by a lot of the times, I mean probably 100% of the time, you would not get paid. And you would do this for weeks or months until you kind of like worked your way up. I've heard stories about places. What is Thomas Keller's restaurant? I can't even think of what it is. The French Laundry, where it was like people that had worked there felt like they were pitted against each other to kind of like weed each other out. And it was like very cutthroat to like keep your spot, even though like you weren't really getting paid. And people will still try to do that. I actually had a guy a few restaurants ago I worked at where he put in his notice because he was doing some stages at kind of one of the bigger restaurants in the area. Like the chef was like a really big deal, and he'd done a few stages, and they kept inviting him back. So he's like, I've got the job. So he just quit, and a few weeks later, he was still doing a bunch of these unpaid stages, and they're like, oh, just maybe a couple more weeks and we'll see, you know, if you really fit in. And he's like, what do you mean? I've essentially worked here twice a week for like a month, and you don't know if I fit in? And it's like, it's crazy to me that this kind of stuff happens, and it's really not like, you kind of learn to see these pitfalls the more you work in the industry. I remember during COVID, I was unemployed for a long time because the restaurant I worked at closed. And it was like I would be doing these phone interviews and stuff, and people would be like, oh yeah, you know, just come in, like, you know, we'll come in and have you do like a trial run. You'll come in and work you come in and work for like this full week, and you know, then after that we'll kind of see where we're at. And I was like, okay, well, like, what's the pay? And they're like, oh, well, you know, we would be like unpaid. You'd come and work unpaid for like a week. And I was like, what? And like, yeah, you know, it'd be like 10-hour shifts, and we'll see if you fit in. And I was like, you want me to come work 60 hours? Like, yeah, you know, it's like, it will really give you a good opportunity to see a lot of stuff. And I was like, yeah, but for free? And like, oh, you know, well, we'll feed you lunch. And I was like, absolutely not. I was like, look, guys, I've been doing this a long time. I'm not an idiot. It was like, good luck. 60 hours for free? Yeah, insane. I was like, 610s? No fucking thank you. I also did like a lot of interviews too, where people are like, oh, you know, like what we really need is just like an on-call person. So like if people get sick, we'll call you in. And I was like, so like what would be my guaranteed schedule? And they're like, oh, no guaranteed schedule. And I was like, what? So I would just be on call. Maybe I would work. I was like, what is this nonsense? You just want, if the whole staff gets COVID, for me to be able to come in and just make all the stuff myself. I was like, no fucking way. There's so much shit like that. So much shit like that. I couldn't believe it. And it's like, then people, you know, after COVID, they're like, oh, why can't we find any cooks? And it's like, because you treated us like garbage. You know you did it. It's just like, come on. It's not a shocker. You made us work through the pandemic. I didn't work. I was so my restaurant shut down, which was really, I was such a bummer. I was like, the day that they told us that we were closing, and I had a massive staff there. I had to call like 15, 16 people to tell them that they did not have a job anymore. So did the general manager. So we're just making these phone calls in the office. We're like sobbing, and like when we're done, we just look at each other and we're like, you want to get pizza and ice cream? And we just sat in the office and just like had a good cry. It was devastating. It's the internship fallacy all over again. Yeah, it's like, and it's crazy. And again, it's like so many people left the industry because of this, and because it's like a lot of places don't have benefits. A lot of places don't have health insurance, and some restaurants are adding it in. And this is something that is already affecting the consumer. You might see at the bottom of your check something called a health and wellness charge. This goes towards helping pay for health insurance for the employees, and the amount of times I've seen people complain about it is astronomical. It is probably at least half. They're like, why am I paying a health and wellness charge? What is this nonsense? And that's what it's for. And that is a one step into helping have servers or wait staff, restaurant workers, have the essential pay that they need to live. Now, you could argue, why can't the restaurant just cop this bill? I don't really know. I don't know how many that works on the back end of things. That is something that I'm not privy to or have not been a part of, as far as like the health insurance side of things. That's been like the one place that I had it where I was managing. That was like an HR thing that they took care of, outside of like my scope of what I saw numbers wise. So, but yeah. Oh, I'm aware. It's a classism thing. So this be like a class where you get the exposure and learn the ins and outs of not working, but every business is using it as free work. Exactly. Yeah, it's wild out there.
Like, aren't you arguing kind of like for slavery? I mean, not really slavery, but like,
that's aggressive.
You know, exploitation?
Exploitation,
well, you're
yes.
saying like, well,
for sure, 100% exploitation.
Make money if they paid the minimum wage, so they have to pay them less than that, and it's okay. What the fuck do you mean?
So again, I think that you could pay them more. Okay. Again, so I'm not privy to how the states that have the like where they pay them less than minimum wage work. I don't understand it. But I can speak to what I know in the state that I work in. We could pay them more. You're gonna just the consumer, the guest is gonna see an impact on the bill itself. And again, it's like you already see this with the health and wellness charge. So they could take that health and wellness charge and again bump up the prices. So really the only way to make this happen is to increase prices. Most of it is like 90% of the time, or do more business. Increasing the prices is probably step one. Doing more business is like a fool's hope. Really, at the end of the day.
Like, if your business isn't viable whenever you have to factor in payroll, then your business isn't viable.
Facts.
Like, what
if you
the
can't
fuck?
pay your workers,
How is
you
it
should
so
not
complicated
be
for people?
operating.
I don't understand. Waiters and waitresses don't want to get rid of the tipping system because they make more than hourly wage.
And this is what I was saying, is at a base level, most of these people are not going to want to do away with tips. I've had servers tell me this directly because there are restaurants in my area that are doing this already. They're doing it in a very scummy way, in my opinion, because they're, like I said, they're telling people not to tip, but they're doing the service charge, and the service charge does not have to go to the employees. The restaurant takes it.
It's not just the business's fault. Sure, but like, again, I think that tipping will stop whenever people stop tipping. This is, in my opinion, a completely self-inflicted problem by the American population. And
yes, restaurants are only set up this way because this is how we have them set up. I think it would be a huge shift in restaurant culture for the consumer and for the workers to change it, especially when there are laws already where restaurants are able to pay their wait staff less than minimum wage because of tips.
I think that the American population is so narcissistic and self-absorbed that they're constantly fixated on the way that other people perceive them, and them being disapproved of
what did I miss
for
something?
not tipping is seen to them as more problematic than literally giving their own hard-earned money away. And so the psychological problem where a person feels like they have to put on an act for people that they'll never see again, this idea is, I think, much worse than tipping ever could be. And I think that's really what the problem is. It's because you have people here in the U.S. that value the perception, other people's perception of them more than their own money. I think it's pathetic. It's fucking pathetic.
Yeah, it's like, it's definitely frowned upon to not tip in most circles, for sure. You shouldn't have to feel that way, but again, it's like, as somebody that works in the industry, I'm like, I personally just will tip 20% at least. Because it's like, I kind of know what the behind the scenes look like. If I have garbage service though, I tip less. I mean, that's just how it is. If you give me garbage service, I'll tip less, because especially when it's like, I work in a restaurant and I've definitely ran stuff like by myself. And so it's like, I have an idea of what one person should be able to do, and I'll work into an empty restaurant and still like, I'm like, why did it take 45 minutes to make me a sandwich? Like, what are you doing back there? I could have made 100 sandwiches in 45 minutes. I'm just one guy. And it's like, I can be understanding up to a point, but it's like, at a certain point, it's like, sandwiches is like what I do. It's what I want to do. It's what my pop-ups have been around. Why is it taking so long for one?
And so whenever I see these people feeling like, oh, I have to tip, I think that if you say you have to tip, you're a fucking loser.
Hey, you don't have to tip.
That's what I think.
It's not, you're not forced to tip. Nobody's like holding you down and being like, you're going to tip.
I think a lot of people tip because they're afraid of being looked down on for not tipping.
Yes.
Now, I think that you're right too. I think that there's a lot of reasons, but the main...
I suppose you tip pretty good if it's a place I know I'm going to come back to. Just because it's like... If I'm coming back to a place, there's definitely a reason for it. Either I was completely blown away by the food, or the service is really great, or both.
Main reason is because they don't want to be seen as a bad person. And also think about how like what you're saying feeds into what I'm saying. Like, they're getting a bad salary, so then you're being a good person by helping them, right? So like, you're kind of making my point, but not with like the I'm using like more of like an emotional like argument, and like you're saying it like more directly. I think that there is the emotional component to it, absolutely. Yeah, there's the social pressure. I think that
definitely.
People that are weak to social pressure, I don't have any sympathy for them. I think they're losers, and I think that people...
that's aggressive. That's aggressive, because it's like, I definitely suffer from social anxiety, and but I also don't like, I've never felt like I need to tip. It's just something that I like to do, and I've always been in a position to do it. But it's like, I don't quite agree with what he's saying here. I think it's a little aggressive, but that's his opinion. And you know, he's allowed to have that opinion.
People like that. These are people that you know, they have 7 different Stanley Cups, and they're probably already in stage 2.
Not
of
the Stanley
poisoning.
Cups.
And so, I mean, fuck, guys, that's what happens. I don't feel bad for them at all. So I don't give a fuck. I think if you do this kind of stuff, you're a fucking moron, and that's what you get. Don't want to tip, don't tip. And
yeah,
it will only...
it's as simple as that. If you don't want to tip, don't tip. Again, I'm always gonna tip. That's just how I am. If I have good food, I have good service, I'm gonna tip.
Go away whenever people start having self-respect.
Oh, hold on. What did he say here? Hold on.
And that's what you get. Don't want to tip, don't tip. And it will only go away whenever people start having self-respect.
I don't agree with this. I think it would take a lot of work for this to change. But I don't think it's because, like, if it was an accepted norm not to tip because we knew that people were getting paid what they should be getting paid to be able to live off of, then I feel like the social pressure would not be there to tip. Again, this doesn't really change what he's saying. It doesn't really change what his opinion is on what he's saying. But I don't really fully agree with it. But I don't think that I don't know how to explain what I'm trying to say. I don't think it has to do with like people being like, oh, I respect myself, so I'm not gonna tip. I don't fully agree with that. Maybe I'm like misunderstanding what he's trying to say here. But at the end of the day, I think it would take like a pretty massive shift culturally to eliminate sort of the tipping culture that exists here in the U.S.
That's whenever tipping will go away. It will go away whenever average customers and average citizens have self-respect, which means probably never.
Oh, jeez.
It just needs to be banned. I think that's outrageous. I think it is outrageous for you to tell somebody that they cannot ask for a tip. I think this is a
that is crazy to ban that is crazy, because it's like the restaurant industry is not the only thing that lives off tips. Even looking at streaming here is like you're relying on not everybody's relying. Amsongolds gets a ton of sponsors or whatever, and he makes his money through that. Whatever, he's got tons of other businesses. You know what I mean. But it's like a lot of people in the streaming realm rely on that are full-time streamers, rely on the subs, the bits, the tips, all that kind of stuff. So it's like you can kind of look at it from that standpoint too, where it's like without that structure there, you wouldn't be able to do that as a job. And so you can kind of look at that at the same way, where it's like Twitch is a restaurant, or YouTube, or what have you, where the meat and potatoes of what their platform is, the streamers, are not paid. They're not making an hourly salary to live off of, right? They are relying on subs, tips, bits, cheers, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what it is called on other platforms. And so full-time content creators would not be able to make that money if those weren't there, and if people didn't feel obligated, to do those things. So I think that to just say that it is a problem in the restaurant industry is not really true. Although at the very end of the day, you could be like, well, just don't do that. Just have a different career, which is a fair point. I'm not being forced to work in the restaurant industry by any means. I personally do it because it's what I personally really enjoy. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. Although more lately, I've been like, you know what I could do? You know what I think my dream... When I retire from cooking, when I've had enough, if I don't end up opening my own spot, I think I'm just going to go work for the DMV. I would love to just be able to sit at a desk all day and tell people no. Oh, it would be so good. It would be so good. Just sit there and be like, I don't know what form you need, man. No idea. Just fill them all out. Just fill out all the forms, and we'll submit them all. And then it's like, before a clock rolls around, be like, hour to close? No way I can take anybody else. Sorry, guys. This is going to take way longer than an hour, and I got to go. My soap opera starts at 5 o'clock. I got to get out of here. You know? That's been, like, rattling in the back of my mind for a while, because I've been, like... the burnout is real right now at work. Just, like... I just don't know, it's like I'm watching my boss go through a bunch of stuff and like having to deal with a bunch of like problems that have popped up that aren't like normal restaurant problems, like having apartments above the restaurants, water pipes burst, and now they have to rip out the entire ceiling to fix all the drywall. And he had a couple guys be like, "Yeah, we can do that in 2 days. We could rip out that whole ceiling and have it patched up and fixed and cleaned up in 2 days." And then he brought in a guy that he actually trusts, and the guy's like, 2 days? What? Like, they're crazy. This would take at least a week. And he's like, I don't know what we're going to do if we have to close for a week. We've already had to close because of all the water damage and stuff for a couple days, and we took a huge hit from that. And closing for the ice storm.
Massive overstepping of the government. Like, no, the government should not be able to tell you you're not able to ask for a tip. I think it's outrageous. You can't ban tipping. I think it
is outrageous. To say that you should ban tipping is nuts.
If you want tipping to go away, stop tipping.
It's true. If everybody stopped tipping and nobody wanted to work as a waitstaff anymore, I think that would start an immediate chain reaction of restaurants trying to figure out a different way to pay their employees.
Stop doing it.
Or everyone would be just go to iPads when robot servers. One of the two things would happen. I don't know.
Completely stop doing it. Like if you're not happy with it and you think it's a bad practice,
or just make everybody salary like they did at that restaurant that I worked at. I was saying I was a salaried line cook, just like a basic line guy. Never before have I ever been paid like a I've never been on salary for that. I've only been on salary for management. And again, it's like I feel like it's a little bit easier to take advantage of somebody when they are on just a salary, because it's like this is what you get for the week, no matter how many hours you work. So it's like you can kind of get abused and work more than that allotted 40. I was very blessed and found a place that did not, and I only actually took the job. It really sketched me out to be offered a salaried non-management position at the pay that I was making, but I took it because I knew the CDC at the time, the chef de cuisine. I was like, I'm gonna trust you, but if this fucks me over, I'm out of here. I'm gonna just quit like on the spot. And most of the time, I actually worked under my 40 hours because we were all salary. We were all like under the agreement. It was like we want to close this kitchen and clean it as fast as possible. So most of the time, we were ending the week at like 35 to 38 hours. So not a lot underneath the 40, but it was still under 40, and we never clocked in. So it's like they don't know that we're working 35 instead of 45. Who knows?
Stop doing it. Don't ever tip.
In my experience, the DMV is super nice. Like the ladies ask your pleasantry questions, but like would much rather tell you what Stacy's son was up to and how Janice made a pie for Amber's get together, but made a cherry pie even though James is allergic. Oh, that sounds like the dream. I just want to gossip and tell people no.
And if enough people stop tipping,
maybe I'll be a secretary.
They'll have to change the model.
I think I could be a grumpy secretary.
They would have to, right? And that's the only solution. Well, actually, it's not the only solution. You can also make the government do it, but I don't think that's going to happen either. But yeah, just don't tip. If you don't like tipping, don't tip. And if people get mad at you, just remember that they don't matter. So problem solved.
When you write, your tone influences.
That's an aggressive take. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like if you want something to, it would take so many people to stop tipping for it to affect people that much for them to leave the job. Would we be able to get another? I don't know. I don't know what the solution is. This is something that I've thought about a lot. Again, it's like my goal in life is to open up my own restaurant, and I constantly think about like what is the best way to pay people to work for me.